What's your name?
Ford.
Have you a surname?
No.
This group seems rough around the edges. But you seem clever. Hopefully we can make this work.
I think we should be able to. Yeah. I mean, I think amongst all of us, we should be fine.
Let's make it work.
We'll make it work.
Have you had these magic abilities your whole life like a kid?
No. Again, fairly recently.
Something happened?
understand. can I confide in you for something?
Oh, yes, please.
I'm a little unnerved about this sword. Would you stand watch for a second?
It seems like a bad idea, sure.
Chapter 16. Lauren led Jem and Naya to the stables at a dead run, going straight to Midnight's stall. As she began to ready the blanket and saddle, the mare nickered and tossed her mane, sensing the excitement on the air. "After so many days of idleness, I'm relieved we have something to do at last," said Naya from across the stable. Lauren could not help smiling at her, though she quickly masked it as she noticed Jem eyeing her. "I must admit I feel the same." They had almost readied the horses to ride by the time Chet returned, and with him came Weeth and Shionne. He had already donned his own cloak, and he threw another into Jem's hands. The party brought their horses into the courtyard and mounted quickly, with Lauren dragging Jem up to sit behind her in the saddle. They rode out of the gate and through Ammon's 2 levels to the final gate that opened upon the ramp. There they stopped, and Naya hailed one of the gate guards. "The messenger who just left through here," she said. "Which way did he ride?" "South," said the guard. They did not pause to answer, but rode out at once. Lauren spurred Midnight to the head of the group, but Naya slapped the reins of her horse until the two were neck and neck. At the crossroads, they pulled to a stop again, looking down the south road, but they saw no sign of Huel upon it, nor of any rider. "Shionne, take the lead," said Naya. "If he diverts from the road, you will see it better than any of us." "Chet should ride beside her," said Lauren. "He is a hunter." Naya raised her brows. "Of rabbits, mayhap. I doubt he has often stalked men on horseback." Lauren frowned and Naya sighed. "Very well. Shionne and Chet ride in front." The mystic said nothing, but only nodded and nudged her horse. Now they made their way more slowly, for Shionne could not keep a good lookout at a gallop. The reduced pace grated on Lauren's nerves, but she knew from her own limited experience at hunting that they could not press on any faster lest they lose the way. After a time, Shionne stopped her horse and pointed off the road. "There! Fresh tracks leading that way." Lauren gave Chet a glance. He rolled his eyes and shrugged at her, and she smirked. Naya nudged her horse forwards beside Shionne's. "Can you follow him more quickly now?" Shionne nodded. "Yes. He has cut through the land heedlessly. He does not think anyone is following him." "That is his folly. Lead on." They rode on at a light canter, with Shionne giving her horse only the slightest nudge to keep on track, until the nudge to keep on the slight. Only the slightest nudge to keep on track, until they reached the edge of a forest. The last sliver of sun just barely showed above the horizon, and the way ahead was dark beneath the trees. Shionne looked to Naya and raised her brows. "The trail will soon be hard to see, at least until the moons rise," she said. "But if he continues to ride straight, I think we might follow him easily enough. From here, though, we should go on foot, or we might alert him to our presence sooner than we would wish." Naya frowned. Then she looked to Lauren. "Nightblade, should we press on?" Lauren blinked. Naya had been forceful enough so far. Why now did she wish for Lauren to give the orders? We should. If my suspicions are correct, we cannot be too stringent in our pursuit." With a nod, Naya turned to Shionne again. "As she says." They dismounted, and Shionne led them between the trunks. Very soon, sunlight vanished from the sky that was just visible through the branches above, and they had to make their way more slowly, with Shionne leading them straight down the same direction they had already been traveling. Eventually the moons appeared, and then they were able to increase their pace once again. "How does he know where he is going?" said Jem. Lauren glanced back at him. "We are following his tracks." "I did not ask how we were following him," said the boy. "I know we can see his tracks, or at least that woman can, because I feel blind as a bat in this forest. What I mean is, how does he know where he is going? There is no path here to follow. How does he pick his way so unerringly?" Chet shrugged. "Paths are not always necessary. If one comes to a place often enough, the feet begin to remember the way, Better than a sailor steering by the stars. Weeth raised her head to look at the rest of them. Then he comes this way often. This is not his first time, nor likely his second or third, but one of many. That cast a solemn silence over them all. What purpose could Cal's messenger have for coming so often to the middle of this wood? Soon Shiun bid them all to halt with an upraised hand. Drawing Lauren and Naya to her side, she pointed ahead through the trees. "What is it?" whispered Naya. "I see nothing." "I see it," said Lauren. There, a few hundred paces ahead, was a horse tied to a tree. She could not be certain it was Hewell's from such a distance, but it was black as his had been. "It seems his horse is there. But where is Hewell?" "Close, no doubt," said Shiun. "We should leave our own horses nearby, hidden. Then the three of us, or better, only two, should go on alone." "Three," said Naya. "He would not come out here to be on his own. He is meeting someone. If it comes to a fight, I would rather outnumber them." Shiun nodded. Lauren handed Midnight's reins to Chet, but when she turned to go, he caught her hand. "Be careful," he whispered. "I shall," she told him. "And besides, Shiun and Naya will be with me." Chet eyed Naya. "Forgive me if I am not greatly comforted." Lauren smiled and touched his cheek. "Take the horses and the others and get out of sight, in case Hewell should circle around and return for his steed before we can come to warn you." She turned to follow Shiun. The mystic led the way through the woods, bow out and an arrow half drawn. Naya had not had time to fetch her sword, but she had a knife. Lauren had only her hands, and the dagger hidden on the back of her belt, though she would not draw that unless it was a matter of life and death. They moved as silently as they could. Lauren knew how to muffle her steps, and Shiun was quiet as a mouse. Naya did her best, but the woman was clearly not well practiced in woodcraft, and Lauren winced at her every footfall. A light drizzle began to come down upon them. Lauren put up the hood of her cloak and brushed the hair from her eyes. Shiun stopped and held out a hand for them to do the same. She pointed ahead to where two figures huddled together against the rain. She pointed...
Oh, hey, good morning, Alex.
She pointed ahead to where two figures huddled together against the rain. The one in the red cloak was clearly Hewell. The other, a woman of Feldemarian looks, was unfamiliar.
Just getting a little bit of audiobook editing in before I have to go off to work.
And Lauren was a little disappointed, though mayhap not surprised, to see that she did not wear blue and gray. "Do you recognize her?" said Lauren. "I do not," said Naya, "but that means little. This whole kingdom is strange to me." "This whole kingdom's little."
Big old pop. Or tongue click, I should say.
"That means little. This whole kingdom is strange to me." "Hist," said Shiun, and drew them back into the shadows of the forest, for Hewell had turned away from the other figure and begun to walk back towards them. After he passed them by, Lauren leaned forwards and peered towards the other figure. In her hand she held a piece of paper, a message from Hewell. "There," she whispered, pointing. "I see it," murmured Naya. "Wait a moment longer for him to get out of earshot. Then let us take her." "The two of you go," said Shiun. She raised her bow. "I shall watch from here, and prevent her from escape if she should slip from your grasp." Naya rolled her shoulders, casting her red cloak off her bare, muscular arms. "That is unlikely." Lauren struck out to the left, circling around through the woods as she approached the figure. The woman, whoever she was, made her way through the trees in the opposite direction from where Hewell had gone. She moved slowly, clearly not expecting any threat in the darkness. Lauren shadowed her steps several paces to the left, while Naya drew closer and closer from the rear. When Naya was almost close enough to charge, Lauren made her move. She ran forwards a few quick paces, letting her feet fall heavy and loud, and then slapped her hand on a tree trunk for good measure. The woman came to a stop at once and froze, her eyes searching the darkness. Naya pounced from the shadows and bore the woman to the ground. She fought like a wildcat, but Naya wrestled her face down into the loam, holding one arm twisted behind her back and jerking it upwards until the woman grunted with pain. "Give us the message," hissed Naya through gritted teeth. "I have no message," said the woman. Shiyun appeared from the darkness nearby, her arrow trained on the woman. Lauren pulled her cloak aside and dug through its pockets. In a moment she heard the crinkling of parchment, and soon she had the letter. She pulled it out, broke the seal, and unfolded it, leaning far over so that her body shielded it from the drizzle. The words meant nothing to her, but she did not need to see them. There at the bottom of the page was a symbol she knew well. A twisted, spiked design, like a vine that wound in and around itself, but covered with thorns. The symbol of the shades. She sucked a sharp breath in between her teeth. Naya looked up. What does it say?" "Enough," said Lauren. "We may return to Ammon now. Bring this one with us." But the woman on the ground gave a great heave, and Naya lost her balance for just a moment. The woman's hand darted to her belt and drew forth a dagger. Lauren cried out a warning, diving at Naya and bearing her backwards to take her out of the dagger's reach. But the woman plunged the dagger into her own heart. She collapsed, hunching over the blade, and her lifeblood splashed upon the dark mud to turn it darker still.
Dun dun dun. Ba-ba-ba. Le gasp. Am shocked. Right. I think I got one, maybe two more chapters.
Chapter 17. Darkness.
Hello? The hell is that noise?
Chapter 17. Darkness taker, snarled Naya. She flipped the woman over, Mayup hoping to keep her alive, but it was far too late for that. Lauren seized her shoulder and drew her back. I am sure the darkness below will indeed take her, but we have more pressing business. Hewell has gotten too far already. Mayup he will return to Ammon where we can find him, but Mayup he will not. We must catch him at once. Very well, said Naya. She gave the woman's corpse a final glare before turning to go. Let us chase him down. I will take my anger out upon his hide. As quickly as they could, they ran back the way they had come. When they reached the place where Hewell's horse had been, they found it already gone. Chet and the others emerged from the jungle, the horses in tow. Jem's eyes were wide, while Chet's brows had drawn together in concern. What happened? Said Chet. Hewell came back this way, mounted, and rode off. We were just about to go and find you, for we feared something had gone wrong. Not for us, but for someone he met with, said Lauren. We must catch him, and quickly. Gain your saddles and ride. They did, spurring to a fast trot, for they could not safely go any faster between the trees. As soon as they emerged from the forest into open ground, Shion stopped them. They all scanned the horizon, but could see nothing in the moonslide. Blast it, said Naya. He could have ridden south, or he could have gone north, back to Ammon. We could divide ourselves, said Weeth. Let me take the boys back towards Ammon, while the rest of you ride south. If you find him that way, you will need more strength than we, if we should find him returned to Ammon and in the midst of our brothers. How can he have gone so far in so short a time? Said Naya, as though Weeth had not spoken. We search by moonlight, said Shion, shaking her head. No doubt I could see him if the sun were still up. Lauren thought quickly. In her cloak she had her mage stones, and upon her back she had her dagger. She jerked in her saddle, looking back towards the forest. A moment. I dropped the letter. Without waiting for an answer, she turned and galloped Midnight back into the trees. Jem clung to her back at the sudden movement. Once he had righted himself, he leaned forwards to peer at her. Why did you lie to them? I can hear the crinkle of the letter in your cloak pocket. Because there is something else in my cloak pocket, and I would rather they not see it, said Lauren. Jem, you have proclaimed many times that you are my man and loyal to me. You must prove it now, for you can never tell anyone what you are about to see. Promise me, and quickly. I promise, he said, though he looked even more confused. She steeled herself, and then reached into her cloak.
What about Chet's accent? Jem? Oh.
I'm Jem. I'm just a little boy.
She steeled herself, and then reached into her cloak to draw forth the brown cloth packet. From it she drew a shard of mage stone, a remnant of a piece she had already broken in half, and quickly put it between her lips. It melted upon her tongue, utterly tasteless, and slid down her throat with ease. Jem's eyes shot wide. Lauren? Shush, she said. You promised. Her boots dug into Midnight's ribs, and they came riding back to the others. Naya looked at her with a scowl. That has wasted even more time, growled the mystic. I have decided that Weath's plan is best, and that we should... Lauren let Naya's voice fade to the back of her mind. She reached within her cloak, placing a hand upon the hilt of the dagger on the back of her belt. The night grew bright as day, for in her sight the moons glowed like suns. She saw all the landscape around them in brilliant, vivid color. Even the darkness between the trees was illuminated, as though each leaf was a small lantern casting a silver glow upon the ground. She scanned the horizon in all directions, and her eyes caught upon a movement. There he was, Hewell, riding upon the road, making his way south and away from Ammon. He rode at an easy pace, a light trot his horse could maintain for leagues at a time. "There!" she cried, shooting up straight in her saddle and pointing. "I see him!" Naya stopped talking abruptly and frowned. She looked in the direction of Lauren's outthrust finger. "What? I see nothing." Neither did Lauren, for she had loosed the grip on her dagger, but she feigned surprise. "What? He is just there. A good distance away and small, but it is him. I'm sure of it. Come!" She set off without waiting for an answer, sending Midnight into a headlong gallop upon the road. The others had little choice but to follow her, and so they did, and soon the lot of them were riding hard. Lauren could almost sense the shock that went through the others when they, too, spotted Hewell at last. When they had closed the distance to half a league, Hewell heard them and pulled his horse to a stop. In a few moments they had reached him, and they fanned out to create a semicircle facing him. Hewell did not seem particularly alarmed, but only bemused. After surveying the group, he focused upon Lauren. "Nightblade," he said, inclining his head. His voice sounded as it had in her dream, smooth and bright, fresh with youth, but heavy with the weight of duty. "Has Cal sent you? Is there some news concerning my errand?" "No one sent us," said Lauren. "Though I wonder what masters have set you upon your ride this night, Hewell. I do not think it was Cal of the Mystics." She reached into her cloak to draw out the letter, and held it up so that it fell unfolded in the moon's light. The symbol of the shades was plain to see, even across the few paces that separated them. Hewell stared at it for a moment as though he did not comprehend what she had said. Then, brow furrowed, he climbed down from his horse. He took a step forwards. "Stay where you are," said Naya, drawing her knife and pointing it at him. Shiun drew an arrow and knocked it. Hewell stopped in his tracks. "You will return with us to Ammon, and if you make no trouble, you may even survive the journey." Hewell raised his hands, and a small smile crossed his lips. "I do not think any friendly reception awaits me at Ammon. Therefore, I do not think I shall come with you." An image flashed into Lauren's mind. Hewell in her dream, when his eyes had glowed white and he had transformed into a crow. "Wait!" she cried. "He is a—" She was too late. Hewell's eyes filled with light, and his body erupted into a mass of flesh, muscle, and fur. A black bear stood where he had been a moment before, and around its feet pooled the shredded scraps that had been his clothing. Hewell roared and lunged at them. A massive claw took Weath's horse in the side, and the beast screamed as it died. Weath flew from the saddle and rolled away from the road. "Back away!" cried Lauren, wheeling Midnight around and dancing a few paces off. "Shiun!" The mystic had already sprung into action, drawing and firing an arrow. The shaft pierced Hewell's side, and his bestial roar took on a note of pain. But he sprang towards her, and Shiun had to spur her horse away before she could fire another shaft. Leaping from Midnight's saddle, Lauren threw the reins into Jem's hands. He caught them on instinct and opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Lauren cried, "Get to Ammon!" and slapped Midnight's flank hard. With her nostrils filled with the scent of bear, the horse brayed in fear and rode north for the fortress, with Jem desperately clinging to her back. Lauren thought of reaching for her dagger, but what good would it do her? Its short blade would not save her against a bear. It was proof against magic, yes, but did that mean it could stop a weremage's claws? She had never had a chance to test it. Now did not seem the best time to do so. Shiun was dancing back and forth, giving Hewell no clear way to charge. Naya stood a few paces off, brandishing her knife, but it seemed as impotent as the dagger. Chet had dismounted and stood beside Lauren. His face was grim. Lauren took his shoulders. "It is a bear. How do you hunt a bear?" "Go into its cave with spears," said Chet. "We do not have a cave or spears," said Lauren. "And we are not dealing with a savage beast. Hewell has a human's wit." Chet shrugged helplessly. "What do you want me to say? I've never hunted a weremage before." Lauren gave a frustrated growl, but then the ground shook beneath their feet and she heard Naya shout. She flung herself to the side, seizing Chet's cloak and dragging him after her. Hewell barreled past them in a flash of black fur, roaring his anger as his terrible claws passed through the air where they had just stood. Naya and Shiun seized them and pulled them to their feet. Shiun had another arrow nocked, but she did not draw. Weeth stumbled over to them, shaking her head dizzily. "Shoot him," said Naya, looking to Shiun. "I am not a good enough shot to strike the eye, and nothing else will be a worthwhile strike," said Shiun. Lauren saw that Hewell had turned back towards them and was edging to the right, presenting only his front. "The skull is too thick, and the shoulders are useless." "Not if we can drive a knife into them," said Weeth. "But that is a dangerous job, to be sure." "I will do it," said Naya. "Only I will need a distraction. If I had a spear—" Weeth shook her head and then reached to her belt and drew a knife. "I will do my best." "And I," said Lauren. "But I have no blade. Does anyone have a knife to spare?" She feared to reveal her dagger with all of them so close to her. Naya knelt and took a blade from her boot. "Here." Lauren followed Weeth, who approached the bear slowly at a half-crouch. Behind her, Lauren heard Chet mutter, "No one offers me a knife." There came the rasp of steel on leather from Shiun, and soon Chet crept up beside Lauren and Weeth with a blade in hand. The three of them moved slowly forwards while Shiun stepped to their... right to flank Hewell. Hewell let out a low growl. It rumbled from his chest and thrummed in Lauren's boots. She breathed deep to steady herself. "I doubt he will charge again," she muttered, hoping the weremage could not hear her. "He has seen we can evade him too easily. Likely he will stand his ground and swing at us. He does not need to press forwards into our midst, for he knows he can wait for us to step within reach." "What should we do, then?" muttered Chet, speaking from the corner of his mouth. "We need to get his attention." "Faint at him," said Weeth. "I will do it." "You have been hurt already," said Lauren. "Let me." She did not wait for an answer, but took 2 quick steps forwards. She slashed at the empty air 3 paces from where Hewell stood. He lurched backwards and swiped at her, growling. But quickly he turned his focus to Shiun, for she had raised her bow and begun to draw. Lauren took another half-step towards him, but he lunged suddenly, forcing her to dance back. Just then she saw movement over his shoulder. There was Naya, creeping forwards through the grass, little more than a shadow in a red cloak. She lifted one hand, her dagger held ready to bring down in a stab. Hewell paused. He raised his muzzle into the air, sniffing. With a wordless cry, Lauren lunged and slashed at him. He jerked away, just as an arrow from Shiun flew forth and lodged in his foreleg. Chet, Lauren, and Weeth pressed forwards, brandishing their knives. Hewell bellowed and reared up on his hind legs, and then Naya struck. Leaping forwards, she wrapped one thick arm around Hewell's neck and plunged the knife into his shoulder. He cried out anew, but this time the sound was pure fear. Lauren's elation lasted only a moment, for whether by accident or intent, the weremage toppled backwards. Naya had to throw herself clear and roll away, taking the knife with her. Hewell rounded on her, swiping at the air, but Naya rolled again, distancing herself. No sooner had she risen to her knees than she flipped the knife into her fingertips and threw it. Hewell only just raised a paw in time, and instead of driving into his throat, the dagger buried itself up to the hilt in his foreleg. A low whine issued from the bear's throat, and white light came from its eyes once again. Slowly, Hewell shrank, his thick coat of fur sinking back into his body. In the shrinking of his frame, Naya's knife slid free. It fell to land in the dirt, coated in red. At last Hewell stood before them, naked and panting in the moon's light, blood pouring from his wounds. For a moment, all was still. Then, though nothing had been said, Hewell began to laugh. "Oh, you are a clever one indeed, Nightblade," he said. "I do not know how you learned the truth about me, but once again you have shown your worth as a foe." His familiar tone made her pause. "What do you mean? I have never seen you before, and you know nothing of me." "You are the Nightblade. Everyone knows of you," said Hewell, and now his smile turned cruel. "Rogan and his undying brutes, my brothers and sisters, and sweet Damaris of the family Yeren. She in particular sends her regards, and she looks forward to her reunion with you, which, now that I am exposed, will certainly be soon in coming." "What reunion?" said Lauren. "Tell us what the family Yeren is planning, and you may yet escape with your life." "Do you think I believe that?" he snarled. "I have played at being a mystic for years. I have seen how they treat those they put to the question. No, such a fate is not for me." His eyes began to glow. Beside Lauren, Naya straightened with a start and then lunged. "He is healing himself!" Hewell jumped straight up, and in the air he grew a beak and black feathers sprouted from his skin. The crow's wings flapped desperately as Shiyun's hastily loosed arrow pierced the air below him. He flew off through the sky, giving a raucous, braying caw. The sight of the beak erupting from his face, indeed his whole transformation, made Lauren weak. It threw her mind back to her dream, and she saw Chet's opened throat. But then she turned to see him standing beside her, alive and whole. Her mind could not reconcile the images from her dream and the sight before her eyes. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the ground. "Lauren!" cried Chet. He knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" "It is nothing," she said, shaking off the vision. "A moment's dizziness, that is all." He frowned at her. "Did he hurt you? I did not see him land a blow." She shook her head quickly. "He did not touch me. I am all right." With his help, she fought her way back to her feet. Naya, Weeth, and Shiyun all stood there, looking at her. "I'm fine. Except that he has escaped, and we have nothing." "We have enough," said Chet. "You have the letter. That is proof enough of his guilt." "And what use is guilt?" snapped Naya. "He could lead us to those who commanded him, and now we have not the faintest clue where to find them. Who cares if we know the dog misbehaved? I wish to find the masters who told him to bark." "Well, we have not done that," said Chet. "Scowl about it if you wish." Naya opened her mouth to reply, but Lauren cut her off. "You said he healed himself. What did you mean?" The mystic glared. "Weremages. They transform their own bodies, and therefore many are able to close their own wounds and stop themselves from bleeding to death." "That is a useful talent," said Lauren. She had not meant it as a joke, but Naya gave a grim smile anyway. "Mayhap, but it is almost as painful as suffering the wound again. I take some small comfort that I caused him that much pain at least." Lauren sighed. "I find little to give me comfort just now. Come, let us mount our horses. We have a long ride back to Ammon, and we do not bear good news."
They do bear bad news. Unintentional puns. Hate to be the bearer of bad news, Cal. God damn it, Lauren! Alright, I'm going to use the restroom while these files upload real quick. Be right back. Oof. Hurrah! Praise the chair. We have a command for that. Wow. All right, screw it. I'm gonna push one more chapter. Which will probably result with in Megan coming up at some point and being like, "Hey, are you going to be late?" I'm going to say, "Yeah, slightly." But you know what? That's okay.
Chapter 18. Chapter 18. 2 horses were gone, so Lauren rode with Chet and Weeth with Shiyun. They rode back to Ammon quickly enough, but Lauren did not press them too hard. There seemed little need for haste, since it would not change what they would find at the end of their ride. As they rode up the ramp, Lauren stole a glance at the... As they rode up the ramp to the front gate, Lauren stole a glance at the mystics beside her. She had not thought of it until just now, but if there were any consequences to face for their actions that night, the mystics would likely suffer worse than she would. She was the Nightblade, and it was not entirely clear whether Cal was her master or not. But these were Cal's soldiers, and they had ridden off in Lauren's company without orders. Cal did not seem the sort to take such things lightly. It might be things lightly. Things lightly. It might be best if we do not mention your involvement. It might be best if we do not mention your involvement tonight, said Lauren. Naya looked over at her. In coming with me, I mean. I can tell the Grand Chancellor that it was only Chet and I, and eschew any mention of you at all. Weeth pointed up ahead. Though I appreciate your selflessness, I doubt that would work. Lauren looked up. There at the top of the ramp, the drawbridge had already been lowered. Standing just inside of Ammon's gate was a party of mystics on horseback. At their head was Cal, and beside him was Jem, who still rode Midnight. Lauren felt her stomach do a turn.
Yeah, doing a final editing pass on Weremage and uploading it as I go. Hello and welcome. Nice. Okay, come on, audition. Let's do the thing.
They reached the top of the ramp and stopped.
Nightblade?
Growled Cal. Grand Chancellor, said Lauren.
I had meant to ride out to your rescue, for I gathered that it was necessary. It seems that is no longer the case. I imagine you have some tidings for me.
I do, though I fear they are ill news.
What other kind is there these days? Very well. Come.
He turned and led her, not quickly, but at a walk even slower than if they were on foot. If they were slower. Even slower than if they were on foot, all the way back up through Ammon's 3 levels. In the space of a few heartbeats, it became monotonous and then tedious, leaving Lauren's mind free to wonder about the tongue-lashing he no doubt had in store for her. As she considered it, she realized that that was likely the point. This plodding pace was meant to give her as much time as possible to contemplate her impending fate. When they reached the stronghold's keep, Cal dismounted and handed his horse off to a stable boy. Lauren quietly asked Jem to see to midnight, and then followed Cal into the fortress. As they approached his council chamber, they found Annis waiting in the hallway. The girl paced back and forth, hands twisting together anxiously in front of her, as though she awaited news of some close relative lying upon their deathbed. When she saw Lauren approaching, she came running up. "Are you whole? Jem said—" "I am safe," said Lauren. "We all are. I must speak with the Grand Chancellor."
Indeed you must, said Cal. But the girl comes too. The rest of you, however, may leave us. I have no wish to move the entire year's end feast into my own chamber.
Chet looked to Lauren, and to Lauren's surprise, so did Naya. She steeled herself. "The rest should be present as well. Our tale is unusual, you might say, and I would rather that you did not hear only my account of it." Cal glared, but he did not argue with her, and the whole party followed Lauren into the room. They all stepped back towards the room's edges, away from Cal and the council table. All except Naya, who stood just beside Lauren but a half step back, the way a soldier stood by their commanding officer. But Lauren pushed that comparison out of her mind at once and began to tell her story. She left nothing out, save for the moment she had eaten mage-stones. Soon she came to the end of her tale. The moment she finished speaking, Cal snorted.
A weremage? I told you I have known Huel since he was a boy. I have known his father. He went through the trials. There was no trace of magic within him.
Lauren looked at the others in the room. Weeth and Shiyun shifted on their feet, not meeting Cal's gaze. Only Chet and Naya looked straight ahead, unflinching. "It is true, Grand Chancellor," said Chet. "We were all there." Cal looked at Naya. She gave him a small nod. His scowl deepened. "Huel made mention of how long he had been a mystic," said Lauren. "He called it a charade, one he had been forced to play for a long time. Mayhap he was entered into your service for just this purpose, in which case his father may not be so close a friend as—"
"Be silent,"
said Cal, slapping his hand on the table. Slapping.
Shut up, Cal, you piece of shit.
Slapping his hand on the table.
"If what you say is true, do you not think I can come to that guess on my own? The High King's favor has given you too high an opinion of your own wit, high enough that it spurs you to foolish courses of action, like pursuing one of my own men into the wilderness without orders."
Lauren had to restrain a grim smile. Her tone had mayhap been too condescending, but in truth it felt good to throw Cal off balance after the way he always grumped at her. "You call that foolish? Had I gone to you, we might have missed Hewell altogether, and you would know nothing.
I know little enough now,
said Cal.
Had you done things properly, Hewell might not have escaped.
Lauren's hand tightened where it held her belt. I serve the High King, she said, quiet but firm. I will do what I think is in her best interests. Rather than answer, Cal turned to the rest of them.
You are all dismissed.
The mystics began to move for the door, but Chet tried to speak up. We have told you already why we...
You are here to corroborate Lauren's tale,
said Cal, his voice rising.
Now that is done, you are as useful as a second nose. Get out! You are neither in the High King's service nor mine. You are nothing more than the Nightblade's bedfellow guest.
Chet's whole body tensed. Lauren saw the muscles working in his jaw, but she put a hand on his arm and turned him to face her. It is all right, she murmured. Go. He did, but only after giving Cal a final dirty look. Naya held the door until he was through, and then, as she closed it behind them all, she locked gazes with Lauren for a moment. She gave a small nod and a smile, and then she was gone. But Lauren noted quietly that again Annis had remained in the room, and Cal still paid her no mind. Lauren braced herself, certain that now Cal would loose the full strength of his wrath. He looked like a pot about to boil over, his anger frothing just below the lid. But rather than shout, he held out a hand.
You said there was a letter. Give it to me.
Tension bled from her, and Lauren reached into her cloak with relief. After she handed it to him, Cal whipped the letter open and looked it over. Lauren wished she had had someone read it to her before she returned to Ammon, but there had been no time. Cal frowned.
Darkness damn this place. Girl, fetch me that lamp.
At first Lauren thought he meant her, but he waved his hand at Annis. She started, as though she was surprised to be called upon, and then hastened to obey. Cal sat down in his chair and held the letter close to the light, his eyes skittering back and forth across it. When they reached the bottom of the letter and the symbol of the shades there, his frown deepened.
This is, in part, a report,
said Cal.
A report of your arrival here at the stronghold and a brief account of your actions, few though they have been. It seems you have attracted someone's interest.
You mean Damaris, said Lauren. It must be her. Beside Cal, Annis's expression grew solemn, and she dropped her gaze to the table. But Cal raised his brows and leaned back in his chair.
That seems quite a guess.
Hewell mentioned her. He said we would be reunited soon.
If...
Cal paused, and his mouth twisted as though he had just bitten into a piece of spoiled meat.
If Hewell is indeed an agent of the enemy, he may have spoken only to throw you off the trail. We can put no stock in any of his words.
Her recent dream flashed back into her mind. The city where she had seen Hewell and what he had told her there. Welcome to Dahab. She braced herself, and then she took the leap. There was something else Hewell mentioned before he escaped. A place called Dahab. The room fell utterly quiet. Annis looked up, her eyes wide with wonder, and then she and Cal traded glances. Lauren had feared she might get only blank looks from them, but this was somehow worse. Was Dahab indeed the city she had seen in her dream? And if so, how had she seen it? What was happening to her?
That is quite a detail,
said Cal.
Why did you not tell us that when you first mentioned the tale?
It has been a long night, said Lauren. It slipped my mind.
Is there anything else?
Big ol' click.
It slipped my mind.
Is there anything else that slipped your mind? Surprise is not healthy for the elderly, and tonight has turned the last of my beard gray.
Lauren shook her head quickly. That is all. Cal studied her for a moment, and then he threw the letter down. He began to pull at his beard, while Annis leaned surreptitiously over the table, trying to see the letter. I think that Damaris is in Dahab, said Lauren. "I think that this letter was for her. I wish to go there and capture her." A loud snort erupted from Cal as though by accident, so loud that for a moment he dissolved into a fit of coughing.
Do not be ridiculous. You propose a perilous mission led by little more than a far guess. Damaris is of no interest to us now. Rogan is the greater threat. You do not even know anything of Dahab.
She had gone this far, and so there seemed little sense in restraining herself. The visions in her dream had proven correct. "A city of gold. It is built around a waterfall, is it not?" Cal rolled his eyes.
Very well, you have heard of it, but the rest of what I said holds true.
"This is the best chance we have seen," said Lauren. "Damaris is there. I can feel it. After our confrontation in the Great Rocks, she went to ground, and there she has remained ever since. She must be in Dahab, and furthermore, it makes sense to pursue her. She worked with Rogan and with the Shades. When the attack on the seat failed, Rogan and his soldiers would have needed somewhere to hide, and someone to help hide them. Who better than the family Yeren, and Damaris in particular? Finding her could lead to him. It seems to me that this is but the first step in the mission you set before me."
Pardon me if I do not trust in your feelings,
said Cal.
I have only ever trusted information from reliable sources, and I will not change that now.
Lauren shook her head and leaned over the table. "Where do you get such information? From your spies. You have them all across the 9 kingdoms, do you not? Let me be one of them. It is better than sitting here idle as I have since I arrived. Annalyn did not raise me up so that I could languish away here." But she had gone too far at last, for Cal shot to his feet and slammed both hands on the table.
Do not bandy the High King's name about here as though you were her kin, you upstart little sow. She appointed you the Nightblade so that you could follow my orders, and that is what you will do.
His fury almost made her quail, and for a moment she saw not Cal, but her father, and his meaty fists clenched by his sides. She shook away the image. Her father was not here. He was dead, and she would never flinch before an angry old man again. "Before the High King brought me into her service, I always acted on my own. It is what I did during that time that made me valuable enough that she desired my assistance in the first place." Cal roared so loud and with such force that a fleck of his spit splashed upon her cheek.
"No, what you did during that time led to the death of Jordell."
She froze. Cal had made no move towards her, had not made to hit her as her father had. Yet she felt as though she had been struck in the gut, and a far harder blow than she ever suffered at home in the birchwood. She felt a stinging at the back of her eyes, and she fought it away. Cal would not get the satisfaction of seeing her weep, but he seemed to know how deeply he had hurt her. Though he did not smile, she thought she saw a grim satisfaction in his eyes as he leaned back.
Did you ever consider that Mayup Annalyn brought you into her service so that she...
Yeah, he's the worst. Not the worst, but he is a thoroughly bad person on the side of the good guys. He's just not a good person at all. I did have somebody back in the day when Weremage first came out that was like, I don't know, thought that the text was thought that the text was justifying Cal. Basically that, you know, like there was some sort of message or component of like, well, you have to put up with people like this to get good stuff done, and if that is what someone takes away from the text, they are not taking away what I intended at all. Which is neither their fault nor mine.
Did you ever consider that Mayup Annalyn brought you into her service so that she, or someone, and I suppose the duty is now mine, could keep an eye on you? Left to your own devices, you helped Zane escape the law, and then escaped Jordell. By your side, he fled halfway across Underrealm. Because of you, Jordell was banished from his order. My order, I should say. And then he died for it. You do not need to be left to run free. You need someone who knows what they are doing to instruct you. Darkness take you, you must heed those instructions. Darkness. You do not need to be left to darkness take, and darkness. You, and darkness take you, you must heed those instructions. It is even in the name you have been given. You call yourself Nightblade. A blade is a tool, a knife in the hand, to be wielded, not some thrice damned hero of legend.
Lauren wanted to answer him. Nightblade was no one's tool. Menet had never been a tool.
Thanks, Vale. Have good writing.
He had been his own man. And had she not always desired to be Menet? But words would not come, not because she could not think of them, but because they would not emerge past the tightness of her throat. And if she forced them to, they would come with tears. She would not allow that in his presence. In the silence that had consumed the room, it was Annis who saved her by speaking up at last. If she is a tool, then use her. That is a tool's purpose, is it not? To be used, honed. I have walked beside Lauren almost since the beginning of her travels. I know her as a girl far more capable than many give her credit for when first they meet her. You sent her to the High King's seat with little more than a message to deliver. In turn, she saved the Lord Prince, the High King, and all the 9 kingdoms. She may surprise you again, but she will learn nothing and serve no purpose if she stays here in Ammon. Cal glanced at her.
Nor will she learn anything if she gets herself gutted in some back alley in Dahab. You may have your uses, girl, but that does not mean I hold you in much higher regard than the upstart here.
Yet you need a spy to investigate this information, said Annis. And by sending Lauren, you may solve 2 problems at once, for she will need a party of mystics to accompany her. She looked at him steadily as she said it, and when he looked to her, they shared a long moment of silence. It seemed to Lauren that something passed between them, something she could not understand. Finally, Cal gave a frustrated growl and turned back to Lauren. Finally, Cal gave a frustrated growl and turned back.
There you are.
Growl and turned back. Did growl and turned back to Lauren.
Very well, he said. But there will be rules. Vow to obey them, and I will send you. Refuse, and you can stay locked in your bedchamber until you rot.
Lauren lifted her chin. What rules?
You will do nothing foolish, said Cal. That means you will not take any action, real meaningful action, I mean, without consulting me first by letter. You will go to Dahab to see if Damaris is there. If she is, you will send word, and you will only send word. You will take no action against her in Dahab without my express approval and guidance.
The thought of finding Damaris there, and then not capturing her, grated on Lauren's very soul. But if she did not agree, she would be forced to stay here. Very well, said Lauren. I vow I will obey you to the letter. Cal snorted.
To the letter. Very well. We are done here, and you may take your dramatics elsewhere. It is late. Girl, I shall not need you any longer.
He waved Annis off and turned to his desk in the corner. Annis came to Lauren, and they left the chamber together.
Okay. Gonna bounce and upload this, and then I got to go. Malam, 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 malam. I have a new journal for my next. This one's almost done. You can see I'm almost at the tail end. So after this month, actually, you know what? I could probably get one more month out of this. But maybe I don't want to, is the thing. Because I have a new journal. This company stopped making this journal. So I went and I found a new one. And it looks good. It has all the same design choices that I like the most. And, you know, functionally, it should be very nice. But this is the current one. This is the new one. Look how thick that boy is. That's a thick boy. Ooh, he thick. So anyway, excited for that. Okay, files uploading. And that means it's time for me to go. And so, the eternal question, who are we raiding? So as of now, I've got 4 hours to catch up. I think that I might try to pull a late night of editing tonight. And I might stream it as well. What did I get through chapter 18? We're coming up on halfway there. Yeah, because I just want to start getting and keeping on schedule. Alright, who are we raiding? Who are we raiding today? Let's raid Cipher of Tyr. Uh-oh. Why no sound?
Right over.
Okay. Alright, let's raid. Please be done, journal. All right. Well, thanks for coming and hanging out, Alex. I really appreciate it. Thanks as well to Vale and Nix for popping by, and Crazed for Now, who I know who you are. I forget every single time, so I do deeply apologize. But say hi to Cypher. He is playing Dragon Age 2, the Dragon Age that I never got to play. But I have a feeling that is... why do I seem to remember that that's right up your alley, Alex? Or am I thinking of Nix? I know one of you likes it. But anyway. Peace out. I might do a late night stream tonight. If so, I'll see you then. Otherwise, it will be tomorrow morning as per usual. Hopefully a little earlier. You may have a stay. All right. Peace out, everyone. Bye.
So I wonder what happens now because I'm clearly not romancing him. Hi, Vloga. Thank you for the follow. For the raid, I should say. Hi, how are you? Welcome on in. What were you doing? What were you playing? Chat, let me know if you want a raid video. Because I could pause this and we could do a raid video. Hey, sir. Ah! I got attacked. Nice. Wrong mage. I have so much writing to do on Motherland. Ooh, Sylvanwood Ring, which I can give to Meryl.
You know you still owe me 5 sovereigns, Elf.
I'm good for it.
Meaning that you'll borrow it from Hawk, probably.